Shalom, everyone. My name is Cody Bannert, and today I am going to be discussing my thoughts on the latest record from In Flames titled Foregone. If you're familiar with metal in general, specifically the Gothenburg Swedish metal scene, as well as melodic death metal, In Flames should require little to no introduction. But in case you're like me and you kept hearing about their name all the time, but very rarely listens to their music. They are one of the most influential and popular bands in melodic death metal and helped to popularize and establish the norms and conventions of the style that they have been utilizing during the late 90s and early 2000s. And they made some very classic records during that time, including The Jester Race and Clayman. Even though I really appreciate this band's fame and their influence, I admittingly always had a hard time connecting with whatever I've heard from them, including like The Jester Race, which I thought was a fine record for what it was, and I can to some degree understand its appeal. It never really moved me that much for whatever reason, and there are other bands and albums from around that time that I actually prefer, including At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul, Death's Symbolic, and even like earlier Opeth like Morning Rise and My Arms Your Hearse. But that's just my personal taste and preferences. Besides that, I was still pretty excited and looking forward to this new album, for it is supposed to be somewhat of a return to the glory days, if you will, of their sound, for they have went more into alternative metal and metalcore, to my limited knowledge, around the 2010s, which caused a very polarizing response. And I was interested in hearing what that would have to offer. My feelings towards this record are overall somewhat mixed, but let's start with the positives. The production is top notch. Everything sounds crystal clear and very punchy and crisp and full without being overblown. The band are still very clearly talented and skilled at their instruments, and they don't let their skill translate into what is basically nonsensical technical wankery. Everything feels like it has a significant musical purpose, and there are some very strong songs that are unfortunately mostly singles. The album starts on a very strong note with a very lovely acoustic intro that then leads into the first main track, as well as its lead single titled State of Slow Decay, which has this very fast-paced and battering energy that I would expect from the aforementioned At the Gates, making for a pretty exciting and blood-pumping number. Following that, we have the more radio-friendly Meteor Maker, which features a pretty hearty and energetic Gojira-esque groove, along with an infectiously catchy hook and a very nice guitar melody and groove backing up that hook. Then we get to the song Bleeding Out, which admittedly features some riffing styles as well as some vocal inflections from the singer Anders, which feels eerily reminiscent of what I would expect from a Breaking Benjamin song. It's not black or white, but I weirdly like it. It has this endearing 2000 style attitude that I find just plain fun. Then we get into what I think is the album's biggest highlight, which is the 1-2 combo of Foregone Part 1 and 2, which together contrast each other in a very interesting way. Foregone Part 1 is very fast-paced and energetic and features no clean singing, while Foregone Part 2 is slower and more melodramatic and has a bit more focus on the clean singing, especially when we get to its very triumphant sounding chorus that I do actually find quite fun. I don't know what it is about that main melody. It should be schmaltzy, it should be annoying, but it kind of works in my opinion. However, I have trouble saying the same about the song that comes right after, titled Pure Light of Mind, which features significantly less interesting songwriting, and everything comes off pretty schmaltzy, pretty corny, and not really as endearing as the aforementioned Foregone Part 2. And from there, the album's quality feels like it has dropped. There are still some pretty strong tracks, such as The Great Deceiver, as well as some other interesting moments, such as the kind of Tool-esque bass line on Sinosure, which also features a pretty nice melody during its hook. And I also quite like the 6/4 groove during the track In the Dark. But there are other things that hold me back from liking the second half as much as the first. For example, speaking of In the Dark, I do not care for its chorus. Countless voices in the dark. Things get to an especially low note when we get to the closing track, End the Transmission, which features some of the album's least effective and moving riffs and hooks, along with some pretty goofy vocal inflections from Anders, especially during the beginning. What do you see? It's also a pet peeve of mine when bands try really hard to prevent the album from opening on an abrupt note while making zero effort in preventing the album from closing on an abrupt note. Like I don't get it. For the album just suddenly ends after the third time and the transmission repeats its relatively uninteresting chorus, ending things on a pretty underwhelming and anticlimactic note. I will also say this, even in its strongest moments, they present and execute every single song in a way that feels very straightforward and, in my opinion, arguably pretty safe, which prevents anything from really blowing me away. Like, wow, that was an amazing song. I find it's just gym music at its best and relatively cringy and uninteresting and mediocre melodic death metal at its worst. But regardless, there is still quite a lot to enjoy about this record. There's still a lot of genuine heart and fun behind a good chunk of this, even though that chunk is made up of singles, pretty much. It's solid. It's not terrible. If you love In Flames and you think this is their best album in years, I'm happy for you. But I see very little reason to go back to it myself. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest record from In Flames. What did you think of it? Did you like this? Did you not like this? If you have given a listen, please discuss your thoughts on it in the comments down below, as well as any constructive criticism on my own review. And of course, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.